Name one thing you've learned without experiencing it. Michelle Goss joins us from Spirit Mountain Healing Center in Arizona. She combines her lifelong love of horses in her horse-guided coaching practice. As a mental health counselor, she talks about breaking down mental and even physical health barriers, building connections, and being in the moment with these powerful animals that instinctively mirror our emotions. Enjoy. Welcome to the Illuminate Recovery Podcast. We shed light on mental health issues, mental illness, and addiction recovery. Ways to cope, manage, and inspire. Beyond the self-care we will discuss, you may need the help of a licensed professional. My name's Kurt Nider. I'm a husband, a father, entrepreneur, a handyman, and a student of life. I avoid conflict, I deflect with humor, and I'm fascinated by the human experience.
And I'm Shelley Mangum. I am a clinical mental health counselor, and my favorite role of all times is grandma. I am a seeker of truth, and I feel like life should be approached with tremendous curiosity.
I ask the dumb questions.
I fill in the gaps.
The Illuminate Recovery Podcast is brought to you by Illuminate Billing Advocates. Make billing and collection simple with leader in substance abuse and mental health billing services. Verification and analysis of benefits, pre-authorizations, utilization management, accurate claim submission and management, denial and appeal management, and industry-leading reporting. Improve your practice's cash flow and your ability to help your clients with Illuminate Billing Advocates.
Kurt and I are super privileged today to be able to speak with Michelle Goss. Michelle is a horse-guided life coach at Spirit Mountain Healing Center. She has a master's in mental health and equine therapy in Gilbert, Arizona. As a horse-guided coach, Michelle has the privilege of bringing horses and people together for more than 30 years for the purpose of starting conversations about mental health and life issues, which in the beginning are never easy conversations. This is where horses help to break down these barriers without ever saying a word. By drawing upon their unique abilities to read our body language and mirror our emotions, we can learn new ways to manage anxiety, fear, grief, anger, and many other emotions. Spirit Mountain Healing Center, where horses do not teach us about riding, they teach us about life. Michelle, thanks for being with us. I think equine therapy is maybe one of the most popular and exciting aspects of mental health treatment, and so I'm really glad that you came on today to kind of talk about what you do.
Oh, I appreciate that.
So, talk a little bit about how you ended up getting into equine therapy. What's your history and what brought you to that space?
Well, how I like to start the story is the first word out of my mouth wasn't mom and dad, it was horse. I've always had a passion for horses since I can remember. Anything with horses, it wasn't just a phase, it's in my genes, in my blood. So I did everything I could around being with horses and learning about them as a kid and whatever. Eventually went on. I have a Bachelor of Science degree from the University of Wisconsin River Falls in equine science. I have a minor in small business. After all that, went on to be a professional horseback riding instructor and trainer for nearly 30 years, most of it here in Arizona. And that's where I've developed a lot of my 35 years of working with people and horses in all sorts of different ways. I've worked with different types of horses, different people, different disciplines. And a student of mine said a long time ago, I've always had a holistic approach to how I've done things, and that I was never what you call a traditional trainer. I've always had a passion for learning how to do things. I would learn how to emanate my students if they're having problems and figure out how to help them with that. Very, be in their shoes type of thing. And so I did that, and fast forward, life throws curveballs at you. Found myself divorced and a single mom of a 3.5, 4-year-old. And the economy shifted in 07, 08, and riding lessons became a luxury item, not a necessity, and I was struggling. So kind of started looking at what do I want to be when I grow up again, and everything was around horses, and I saw some things about counseling and coaching, things like that, and reached out to a friend of mine who was a social worker at a school at that time, also a horse person, and said, hey, what's this like? And she says, oh, in a couple of years you can do it. Took me down to Tucson to a clinic that introduced me to equine-assisted mental health, and it completely resonated. It was totally my passion. I just went, I've got to go do this. How do I do this? And she introduced me to Prescott College here in Arizona, and then that's where I got my master's degree in counseling psychology and equine-assisted mental health. And been combining my 35 years of experience, like I said, working with people and horses to bring a very unique aspect, as I call it, horse-guided coaching, because the horses do guide the sessions. Mm-hmm. And I love the work that I do.
That's fantastic. And it's fascinating that, animal therapy or, treatment animals is not so new, but horses are a mighty big pet to be, doing therapy with. Talk maybe, if you can, a little bit about what a therapy session looks like and what kind of shifts and changes you're seeing as you work with clients.
Okay, the biggest thing to start off with, why I feel it's so powerful with horses and humans. First of all, horses and humans have been together for centuries. It's documented, and there's just this connection. But the biggest thing I think that really adds to the sessions is that horses are prey animals and we're predators. And horses' main means of defense is running. And so by understanding behaviors in that, they either give us what we need or show us what we need in that moment. They're very tuned to body language, subtle energies, because they need to make decisions about their life very quickly. And that's where the utilization of horses is very powerful. And I believe a lot of my experience of 35 years of working with horses, understanding their behaviors, I worked with a lot of, quote, problem horses, and, understanding where they're at and their energies. So a lot of times the first session, we have a quick introduction about what I do and any questions and safety things and that. And I always tell my clients that I am the navigator of their journey. They are the captain. My job is to help keep them as safe as possible. But as I like to say, I'm going to warn them if there's an iceberg coming up. But if they want to run into it, well, then we'll figure out what we do with it. And, at any time they're not comfortable with anything, they get to say so. There's no right way or wrong way to do any of this because it is in the moment, it's experiential, and we're working with other sentient live beings who will take control of the session, hence horse-guided coaching. So a lot of times I'll ask them, are you comfortable going into the pen with the horses? They're usually out in their paddock, free. And if they say yes, I'll tell them to go on in and introduce themselves to the horses however they want to, and take some time to do that. And then I ask them, just notice, what you're seeing, what you're feeling, those sort of things, what's coming up for you. And then we'll start to process with that. Other students, clients and that I've had high anxieties, just not real comfortable around it. So we'll find other ways to do it. I have a pen that is called the Amazing Pen, and maze as amaze, because that's exactly what it's been built into by clients. And sometimes we'll just go out and do some activities, necessarily not with the horses, to help reduce anxieties. Get comfortable with that. So it's very individualized, very specific to each person, each group, each member at that moment.
When you're working with the horses, those horses are, you talked about, or your introduction maybe a little bit talks about the way those horses mirror, our emotions and mirror. What does that look like as a client comes up to a horse? How does the horse respond to them so that you pick up and the client picks up that something's going on here?
Well, there's several different ways. A lot of it is understanding horse behavior and how they react. When we have more negative type emotions, it puts us as humans more into a predatory mentality, and they're going to react. So they'll move away. Sometimes they won't engage. They'll go different areas. Sometimes they'll come up and try to bite or pin their ears. It's a variety of different things. I think a perfect example of it is an adult female that I've been working with who's been very shut down to her emotions. Recently, we were standing outside the paddock, and she was discussing some issues around her brother, which brought up anger for her. But she showed no external signs, no change of voice, no affect change, anything like that. And every time she started to bring up her brother, the three horses out in the paddock started becoming very aggressive, rearing at each other, bucking, kicking, biting each other every single time. The moment that we discussed it or she calmed down, they go back to doing their business. This happened a total of 5 times during the session. About the 4th session, she looks at me and says, "What's going on with these guys?" And the first question out of my mouth was, "What's going on for you?" They're mirroring. And she wasn't able to bring it up, so I asked her, "What do you see the horses doing?" And she said, "Well, they're aggressive, they're angry, they're going after each other, they're chasing. I've never seen them do this before." And so it opened a conversation right then and there about what's going on for you. I notice every time you talk about your brother, this happens. And she said, "Well, I get angry about that." And we opened a conversation about the anger that she carries. At that time, just being able to see that for herself and experience and know that it was okay. 2 weeks later, she'd actually gone on a family vacation with her brother. And when she came back, she was clearly changed. And I said, "So how'd it go?" And she starts talking about her brother, but this time I could hear anger in her voice. I could see a change in her body. And I actually asked her, I said, "You seem kind of angry about this." And she goes, "I am." And now we could start releasing and working with it. And that's just the power. I mean, that's one example of many.
Interesting. And from a you being face to face with her, you really didn't see any indications that she was angry. You couldn't see the body language, but those horses sure picked up on it, or could you see it too?
I could see a lot of it was by choice of words. Because I've worked with horses for long, I'm quite tuned to body language because it's how I've kept myself safe and years working with the animals. But a lot of it is just allowing the process to unfold and watching. The first time it happened, it's like, I take notice of that. But when it happens continuously during this hour session, it's time to make note of something. Something's going on. And just the fact that she could see her anger, if you will, with the horses. And that's, I think, the biggest power that the horses bring to us is they make our process tangible. It's something we can get a hold of. She could actually see her anger right then and there in a safe way that wasn't overwhelming to her, that wasn't, in a negative connotation. It just was. And they went through it, and when they moved past it, they went back to doing what there was. There was no negativity around it. It just was anger, and that's all it was. So very powerful in that moment.
Interesting. Have you worked, it sounds like you work a lot with adults. Have you worked with adolescents and younger kids?
Oh, yes. As a riding instructor and trainer, I was one of the few instructors here in the Phoenix area that worked with kids 5 and up. I developed a program for them. So, yes, I work with kids, adults, teens, all sorts of things. I have groups. I do couples. A perfect example of one of a young boy that I'm working with. And I love what I do because I can stand alone and just do my own work, like with the adult female, or I can work conjunctively with other mental health professionals. I have a young boy, he's going to be 10 here shortly. He'd seen traditional counseling for anxiety issues and had been taught the traditional coping skills and was doing better. But he was still having, as his parents called them, meltdowns quite frequently. And so they brought him to me, and through the horses, he was actually able to practice those coping skills in the moment with the horses and develop emotion regulation, empathy, all the things, and become very adaptable. When we started, I used a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the highest on where his meltdowns and anxieties were. He was about an 8 or a 9 in the meltdowns 2 or 3 times a day, every day. He was having problems in school, at home with his siblings, just a lot of issues. He was becoming afraid to go to his soccer games, even though he loved soccer, becoming very debilitating. So as we progressed, he's been with me for about 18 weeks or so, 1-hour sessions, and not necessarily every week. And he is now at a point that he has a meltdown, and there is 7 or 8, maybe even a 6, once a week, if that. He's able to now, a lot of the sessions we do, we're practicing skills. And recently gave him an activity, and he went out, and you could clearly see all the skills that he has learned, and work right in the moment and regulate and do what he needed and stay calm. And his parents are just ecstatic. Everything's improved, especially because he's going to be getting ready to go back to in-person school this year. He was all online last year. So we've started talking about the anxieties around that. And he's got the skill set to help him. And his anxieties are, he said, about a 3 or a 4 instead of a 9 or a 10. And, he says, that's manageable. I can handle that.
That's awesome.
He's becoming an amazing young man, and it's just so powerful to see this change and watch him work through the issues as they came up each session right then and there, and be successful and realize, hey, if I can do this with a 1,000-pound animal and practice it, then, he's got that experience and those skill sets. It's very empowering.
And how much of the therapy is done in the pen with the horses and actually on the horses?
There is no on riding, on board stuff. There, it's all from the ground. And a lot of times, sometimes we do activities with the horses in a paddock. Sometimes, like I said, in the mazing pen. I have a round pen. I have arena. I did a group work not too long ago in the arena, so bigger spaces. I have a variety of different areas and different ways I can do activities. Pretty much it's limitless except to my imagination, and I've learned over the years to start a process and just let it unfold, which I absolutely love because it's so unique. I never know what's going to come out of it, and it's just so much fun, the curiosity part of it. So that's why there's no horse experience necessary whatsoever with this, because we do not do any riding. It is all from the ground. And
can you do it with riding?
I could, and that I do work with some clients that have their own horses, and work with that way and empowering that way. Because I have such a unique skill set coming as a trainer and rider, I do offer that. But the majority of what I offer to the public is on the ground activities and that.
So I'm curious about this 10-year-old boy. You're doing work with him. He's done work as with the therapist in the office, and he's got the skill sets. He's understanding it. He's applying it, but his anxiety is still really high. Can you? And I know this unfolds, and maybe you don't have all the words. I don't know, but how? What makes the difference? What made the difference between coming from a therapist in the office and coming into the arena with the horses?
Name me something in your life that you have learned not through experience, good, bad, or indifferent. That's the key right there, is you can learn all this stuff in an office, but then you've got to remember it and be able to go out and practice it. And especially for a young boy who suddenly is faced with an anxiety issue and his system is kind of habituated to being in a high state of anxiety, he's not always going to remember all that. And with mom and dad being upset, it can add too much energy to the system where everything goes out the window. I mean, it's test anxiety and it's in its finest. And so with the horses, in the moment he can become anxious, but in the moment then I'm there to support the horses to work through the process. Well, what skills can you use? How can you use them? And it becomes the how of it and actually applying it in the moment. The only thing we can control is ourselves in the moment, in the present. If we're anxious, we're usually in the future. If we're depressed, we're in the past. And so by being in the moment and experience, he was really afraid. He had a lot of anger. And he'd get afraid because his anger would get so big that he just couldn't function. He couldn't think straight, and he'd have these rages, and he was scared of himself. And by having these huge animals and my support and in the moment and being active, we could reduce that step by step. And the biggest thing is he didn't need to talk about it. He got to do something with it. And I work a lot with anxiety, depression, and traumas. And when we're in those high emotional states, a lot of times we don't have the words. We aren't functioning, and we want to just get better in the moment. And with the horses and what I do, I can offer that the first session right away. Just a subtle shift or just something that shows, wait, there is a different way. There is hope for me, and there is help. And that's powerful.
Super powerful that they're practicing it in the moment, and those horses are responding. They're getting that instant feedback, right? Because the horses are responding instantly to those shifts. Exactly.
Perfect example is a couple that I worked with. I sent them out into the paddock with a couple of ropes and said, okay, draw your space with these ropes, your boundaries. So they did, and then I gave them a bucket of feed, which was their stuff, as I say in quotes. It's, their emotional, their kids, their life, their entire life, and each one had a bucket. And immediately boundaries were being blurred. They were giving their stuff away, feeding horses. They were in their space. It kind of become kind of crazy. And they couldn't keep them away. And this went on for about 10 minutes or so. And I said, okay, come on out. And as they both walked out, the horses were still trying to push them and get in their space. And they have 5 kids, and there's some issues at home with the oldest, who's 14. And so we talked about it, and they're like, okay, yeah, this is what we do. We're always giving our stuff away, trying to placate. And I said, how's this working? Well, not real well. They've got these animals in their space. I said, so what would you like to do differently? Well, we don't know. I said, well, here's the cool part. You get to come up with something right now. We can work on this. And then you get to go back in and see if it works right now. And they're like, really? And I said, yeah. So they talked about it. And the wife's like, let's put all our stuff in one bucket and let's do this and draw a bigger space. So they went and did things. And they had a completely different, they actually set their bucket down, didn't give their stuff away, and were able to keep the horses. And actually, one of the horses actually had enough of it and walked off and stood underneath the shade and went, okay, I'm going to go stand over here. They decided at the end to give a reward for that, if you will, give some of their stuff. And the horse stayed outside of their boundaries, did not try to follow them, did not push them. I mean, completely different. And they were like, wow. And so we could have a discussion around that on how to implement those things now with their children and their life and everything else. And we came up with a plan to start doing that. And you could just feel the energy shift and the empowerment of, they didn't feel like they were stuck anymore. They actually had some hope of, okay, we can do this together. And they actually showed a lot of their strengths as a couple. And we're drawing on that as we're going forward because they have some good strengths. And let's build on those to make some good changes.
That's incredible. And I'm glad you went into that because I was like, that was my next question. What do you do with couples? How does that work? And especially with kids, when you bring kids into the mix, a couple relationship is probably the most challenging relationship we'll ever have. And you add kids to that, and it brings in all sorts of chaos.
Yeah, when they were first doing the activity, I asked them identify which of these horses. I have 3 horses. One was off kind of on the outside, and they're like, well, this is so-and-so. But the 2 that, were in their process, this is definitely this one, and this is this. And, we could identify and be able to set those boundaries and change things in that moment and got instant feedback that was tangible and visible at that moment. Once again, now they have this experience they can take home. We came up with a plan. And as a reminder, it's like when things get tough, remind yourself, remember this experience and hold on to that. We've got a stepping stone to start building. If you can do it with a 1,000-pound horse, yes, it takes some time, but look what you just did in an hour with horses. You've got the process. Let's build on it.
Very cool. How many? I know you said that what you do can be standalone and you can do it on your own and have effect. How many of your clients are working with other therapists and come to you as an extension or addition to what they're already doing?
I've got a couple right now that are an extension. I do have a group. I work with the Substance Abuse Recovery Center right now. Every Saturday they come in, so I'm working conjunctively there to support their recovery. I would say in general, I'd say about 25% are coming from other therapies, or they've had other therapies and at a point that they just feel it's not, they need something different. And then the rest, I would say, are probably on their own individually in that.
When you work with groups of people that are in addiction recovery, is the work that you do different than it would be with someone that's maybe primarily, anxiety or depression or mental health? Do you see the same work?
Oh, I see basically the same work. I love working with groups. In fact, they're my favorites just because groups to me represent a microcosm of what's going on in everybody's life. And so to me, I think the power of the group with the horses is even more, has more of an impact on everybody at that point. Especially coming from a residential group, they already have some connections in that. But I can support individually. I usually have a group activity and that or activity. And that's the great thing about my activities. They can be individual, they can be for a couple. I can use the same basic thing, like the amazing pen. I'll ask an individual, what do you see with this pen? Is there anything you want to change with this maze? And we go from there. I can do it with the couples. And actually, where the amazing pen is right now has actually been built by the group. And it was really an interesting process because very quickly as they were doing it, some of those that were more confident and bold went right out and started. The ones that were more timid and newer in their recovery and learning things took a while to do it. But eventually I brought the horses in and it was an amazing experience. Because I had pairs go off with two horses, one on each side of each horse, and they had to negotiate through these obstacles, and you could actually see them work together on teamwork, communication. They boosted each other's confidence, support, huge relationships all in the hour, and at the end they were all high-fiving each other because they're like, look, we got him to go over this, and oh, it's safe, or it's this. I mean, just the power of that, and I've watched it individually, and I've watched it in couples, groups. So everybody walks away with what they need in that moment.
That's powerful. I would imagine, and you can confirm or deny, that somebody who really doesn't want to do therapy, someone who, is really resistant to that and that's not for them, or they've never done it before, maybe this is their first time in, I would imagine their experience with you in the arena with the horses would be a little bit different and maybe a little bit more approachable. Have you had experience with that type of a scenario?
Oh, absolutely. That's partly why I call it horse-guided coaching. I've over the years kind of poked at it, and it's kind of society as well, that therapy kind of has negative connotations. They've either had bad experiences or know someone, or it's just negative. And I've asked a lot of people over the years, what's your definition or what comes to mind with therapy? And a lot of the blank answer is sitting on a couch telling you my problems. And then I asked about coaching, and it's, hey, that's helping someone that. And I think the biggest thing with what I do that helps break through that is, like on my website, I have a picture of my barn, and it says one of Michelle's many offices. I have an indoor office, but I have offices everywhere, my tack room, in a pasture, wherever. We're not sitting around in a room. It is not traditional by any stretch of the imagination. And sometimes just being outside near these animals, or just outside and just having a conversation about things, is so powerful. I had a client recently who we were discussing some things and kind of became anxious. And she said, can I take a horse for a walk? I said, absolutely, pick a horse. So she picked one, and next thing I know, we were power walking around the arena with this horse discussing. But as her anxiety, as she was releasing it and discussing it and being with this animal and everything, she was processing and was coming down. You know, when we processed the end, she started at about an 8 or a 9 and finished at about a 3 or 4. I've had another client who, her anxiety that day was so high, I was having a hard time keeping up. She was all over the place. Finally, after about 15 minutes of trying to keep up with her, I said, let's go pick a horse. She said, what? I said, just let's go pick a horse. So she picked one. I brought him over to the grooming area, brought out the brush box and said, here's the brush, start brushing and keep talking. Within minutes, I could understand her. She was making complete sentences, and we were unwinding these patterns, and you could visibly see her relax. The horse showed it because his head relaxed. He cocked a foot, he sighed, and he just fell asleep instead of being, because when we brought him out, he was kind of in an anxious state as well. And she looked at me and she's like, wow, that's amazing. So we had a baseline. I said, look, let's for now, every time you come in with the anxiety, let's start brushing this horse or pick a horse so we have this baseline of where we can process and check in. She did this about 3 or 4 sessions in a row, and the 4th session she comes in and I said, are we going to need the horse today? She said, no, I'm in a great place. And she was able to regulate and maintain that without the horse. We did other activities, but she didn't need that. She was able to regulate herself at that point, which was really powerful for her, as she'd been struggling in the past to make her sentences coherent and her point across, being heard and all this sort of thing, because she was just so anxious. Everybody just be like, calm down. And she's like, I can't. And here we found a way for her very simply to get feedback and to calm herself down so she could be heard.
So what's happening in that scenario? What's happening between that woman and the horse that allows her to calm down where she couldn't in other arenas, in other areas, right?
A lot of it is just the connection. I mean, imagine the power of a 1,000-pound animal holding space for you as you are in that moment, even all anxious and everything else, because she was not threatening, she was just anxious. If she'd been more negative and aggressive, the horse would react differently. But she needed space at that moment, and the horse had the ability to hold that space for her as she was and accept her completely and wholly, authentically. You cannot lie to a horse. I mean, you can lie to people all day long, you can lie to yourself all day long, but they see past that. They don't judge a book by its cover, so to speak. They will connect. And if you're authentic in that moment, even if it's high anxiety, they will hold space for you. If it's incongruent, they'll let you know that as well. It's like the adult female with the anger issues. She was congruent internally with her anger, but she wasn't able to connect with it. And they allowed her to do that and show that it was safe. And they demonstrate the process. I mean, here they are, angry, aggressive, chasing each other around and being angry. And once the process went through and it was released, they went back to just being themselves again, doing whatever they were doing before. And that's powerful. A lot of us experience in our life where we need space held for us authentically and it's not given to us. And, in that moment, whatever they need. And some of my clients, I tell them, whatever you need, if you need space just to be, you get to tell me that. There are times leaning against a fence just watching, and the client spends the whole hour with the horse, and we talk about what do you need in the beginning and where you're at the end, and that's all we do. And I'm grateful I can offer that in such a huge range, that there's not that awkwardness of silence. Silence is actually healing and holistic in that moment, which some of us have never experienced before and can be emotionally overwhelming. In fact, adult female of mine, just had that happen for her the other day as we just started. She comes from a very abusive family and wants to be accepted. And I had her go into the paddock with the horses, and I said, I want you to ignore these horses. And she didn't see half the stuff. One was following her around. She didn't see it, all these things. So we discussed it. And a lot of it is what she comes up from her family. She's always been ignored. and dismissed. And I said, okay. So as we talked about it, I said, okay, now I want you to open yourself to the acceptance of these horses. And immediately 2 of them came over, stood head to tail with her in between, and held that space for her literally between them. Horses that are congruent with each other will help each other and will stand head to tail and swish flies off each other's face. They'll groom each other. It's a sign of respect and friendship. So for her to be right between them, and they put themselves in that position right between, around her, holding space because they were head to tail. As I pointed this out to her, she broke down and started sobbing because she could feel that space being authentically held for her for the first time in her entire life. And it was incredibly profound and powerful.
Wow. Yeah, and I can see how it would be. And those horses have no judgment. They have no judgment one way or the other. And even as human beings and therapists, we know that we need to hold this space with no judgment. It's not good, bad, or wrong or right. But we don't always have the capacity to do that wholeheartedly, right? And have no judgment. It's kind of part of our human nature to judge our situations, like those horses are on some level, but they really don't care one way or the other, but whether they're safe or not, right? It's really about a safety piece.
Absolutely. And I think that's part of my uniqueness that I bring to it. Yes, I agree with you on humans and judgment, but I've worked with horses personally and professionally that I've learned to let a lot of that go, or at least recognize it and be able to hold space for it. Because my personal development, I wouldn't be here without a couple of my horses personally and what I've learned. And I can bring that, it's a gift to me now that I can bring to others and share with that. I believe that's my purpose now in life, is everything I've learned through my personal experiences with horses and professionally as a riding instructor and trainer. In fact, I was in the paddock the other day with a client and was holding space for myself up against the fence, and I noticed that one of my horses walked by and kind of jumped and reacted, and I looked, and my client was several feet away from me, and I went, huh. And he looked at me and says, "What was that?" I said, "That would be me." I said, and I knew exactly what was going on in my head. There was some things I was distracted by coming up, and I just said, I'm going to go remove myself, and stepped out of the energy field in the paddock and kept a distance, and sure enough, then he connected and whatnot. So I still use my horses. I have a t-shirt that actually says, "My therapist eats hay," and that's for me too, because there are days that I need that space held for me, and I know where to do it, and they'll hold it for me. Or call me on my stuff, and I need that too. So, I love the power of that.
You don't lie to them very well, huh? That's like they don't accept that they see it, whether you're trying to show it or not.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's kind of a joke that went around my barn a long time ago. Basically, for an average horse, the size of their brain is about the size of a large baking potato, give or take. And the joke became for myself is, well, I've been outwitted and outsmarted by a potato most of my life. So, it's learning to let go of a lot of that and just, accept it for what it is, because they have no malice. They have the best intentions, and to be able to have space held, and for me to be able to help people have that space as well, is just, I keep using the word powerful. I don't know what else to say with that. It's almost undescribable. It really is. It's beyond empowering, and you can take it with you for the rest of your life. That's the thing, is a client of mine several years ago had a very profound experience in the round pen with a horse. She was trying to get the horse to do an activity around, go over a pole in there, and it became very chaotic. The horse was bucking and just running around it and creating major chaos. After a few minutes, you could see her frustration was going up, anger, and it was getting worse. So I said, okay, time out. We processed. The moment she became authentic and connected with that cohesive, the horse came over and put his head on her shoulder. And he did this 5 separate times. She'd send him back out, and when she was incongruent, it was chaos. the moment she got congruent, he connected and did this 5 separate times. It was very powerful. And at the end, as we're processing, she says, I've been through traditional talk therapy and it's helped, but she says, I can choose to ignore words all day long. She says, but how do I ignore that experience with this horse that I just had? And I think that sums it up very clearly.
Yeah,
because it's really hard to ignore that experience.
Yeah, and it's so immediate. It's like you either change something or the whole situation just stays chaotic, right?
Yep, exactly. And I think that's the power. There's so many things, sometimes things sound better in our head, and then when we say them out loud, it's like, that doesn't work well, or that doesn't make sense. And we're the only animals on the planet that have the ability to create an emotional reaction, physiologically and emotionally, by thought alone. Change a thought, change a behavior. But we get stuck in our thought processes. We get stuck in that anxiety and repetition and negative thoughts. And the power of the horse-guided coaching actually stops that, because you're in the moment and you get to see your thought actually play out. Okay, I've got all this frustration or anger or anxiety or whatever it is. Suddenly it's tangible, it's real. You're seeing this 1,000-pound animal be angry or be anxious or chaotic and be stuck in that process. And here you've got the power to shift that, to try something different and get the instant results of that, rather than waiting and getting stuck in your own process. You get to actually find a way of how to get out of it. And it's tangible. It's there. You get to see your results in the moment. I ask clients a lot of times, which would you rather do, mental calculations all day long or dig a ditch? Majority will say dig a ditch. And they say, one, because it's less tiring, because mental calculations definitely are exhausting. But most of them will also say is because at the end of the day, when I dig a ditch, I get to see the effort, I get to see my progress for what my effort. I get out of it what I put into it. And I think that is one of the keys to horse-guided coaching. You get out what you put into it, whether it's total chaos or nothing or whatever it is in that moment, that's exactly what happens. So suddenly the process is now tangible, it's malleable, you can do something with it. And I can't find any other place in my life I've ever experienced that in the moment with that much power.
That's incredible. So I hear you talk about the fact that sometimes your stuff comes up as you're doing work with other people. What does this journey look like? And the one part that I love about that is that you're telling us, without saying it, is that our work is never done, right? There's
Correct.
always work to be done. But what maybe has some of, I don't know if you can share an example, but what are some of the work that you've done with horses that you've been able to process through?
My anxiety. One of the horses is kind of the foundation. I have a full brother sister to each other. Their grandmother was my first horse. So there's a huge connection and that. I believe he was put in my life to call me on my stuff. He's the only horse in my career that I asked for help with training him, and it had nothing to do with his training. It was all me. I think one of the most profound things that he helped me with was my anxiety about keeping myself safe. I've been working a lot with that, certain tools. I've been working with a trainer and that, and I was working on this specific tool. I call it a shutdown. If your horse starts to run away, it's how to rein it in, so to speak. And I was in the round pen working it on my own, and my anxieties were really high. In fact, my trainer, the first ride that I got on him, I took about 2 steps with him and did the shutdown, and he looks at me and he says, you can breathe more than a breath to sustain life. I was literally holding my breath. So I've done a lot of work, and I was working on it, and my horse reacted. I called it boogering, and my anxiety went right through the roof. But I'd worked on it enough that I did the tool and shut it down, immediately and kept myself safe. And I remember bursting into tears at that point, and this huge relief, because what went through my head is, oh my God, I kept myself safe. This actually worked. And I can do this, and the empowerment of it. And I remember holding my horse's head to my leg as this is all going through in, 10 seconds. And he's looking at me like, you okay, Mom? Can we move now? And I remember at that point releasing and just getting off at that point with this huge weight lifted off of me, this anxiety being released of, wow, I can do this, and then proceeding from that. I think that was one of the biggest things that I would say take away from that, that I bring to the table as well.
Incredible stories. Okay, so part of me says don't ask this question because it'll take away from all the really great stories that you've shared. But where do you get your horses from, and do you prefer certain types of horses to do this work?
Well, like I said, 2 of my horses come from my childhood. I've bred them and raised them. They've been part of my life since the day they were born. I have 3 horses right now. I'm actually working in process. I've just applied for a nonprofit status of part of my business, and I'm working on by the end of this year to add a pair of miniature horses to my herd. Right now, one of my horses actually is kind of a rescue from a client, and he's gone through a lot of his work. It's amazing the work he's done and what he gives back now because of that. I've downsized a lot of my herd recently due to COVID and economic things and age. I've lost a couple of my herd. But at this point, I don't really have, my first horse breed that I had was an Arabian. I do have some affinity. The 2 are half Morgan, half Arab. But I have worked with miniatures. I've worked with wild Mustangs. I've worked with draft horses, and everything in between. So I really don't have anything specific to a horse and a breed. Like I said, the miniatures, I want to add those because, one, they're really cute. But with people with high anxiety or young kids, they're less threatening, and we can still do the same work. And with groups and adding miniatures in with the full-grown horses, one of my internships actually had a pair of minis that we would add into the big horses and the full size. And boy, some of the stuff that came up with that was just amazing. Just profoundly, it was just crazy. So there's really no specific. At some point, I'm going to have to add more to my herd or replace them. I'm most likely going to go find rescue horses and do some work with them for myself, have donations, whatever. There's nothing really specific. This is so organic of what I do that I've learned over the years that if I try to not be organic with it, it just doesn't work right. So I keep myself open as possible to the organic of it. And I believe the right horses at the right time will show themselves and be there for me. And there's a guru in the equine-assisted mental health field. Her name is Barbara Rector. And there was a quote that came up, like one of the first intensives that I was at in Prescott College. Intensives, we actually did four four-day sessions at a ranch up in Prescott where we immersed ourselves as participants, and they were intense. But her quote was, "Whatever happens is just perfect." And I hold on to that because that's exactly what this whole process is about.
Which is profound because really, if we come in as a therapist with preconceived ideas about what we're going to do with the client, we just really did ourselves and them a disservice, right? Is to stay curious and stay open and allow things to happen. And I've heard you say it numerous times. I could have never, you could have never dreamt that was going to happen. Like, that was amazing. And if you would have had, if you would have played a role or intervened, then it wouldn't have happened the same way, and it kind of messes things up. So I love that piece about it, and I can tell that working with the horses requires you to be in that space more and hold that space better than maybe what a regular therapist or a conventional therapist might have to do because of the horse work. So that's very cool. I love that you're willing to share these stories with us. They're really powerful, like you said, and and profound to see the extension and how those horses can really affect the way people, can heal and do their work and get that constant feedback, that immediate feedback. That's pretty cool.
Oh, yeah, it is. I love what I do, and I'm quite unique at it. I've had a lot of mental health professionals from the Phoenix area. I do a complimentary overview and tour. I feel the best way, because it's really hard to explain, is either through stories or a personal experience. So I give everybody a taste sample, if you will. And I've had several of the representatives from these different mental health facilities in the valley here come and who have experienced horse, equine assisted therapies and stuff. And I always tell them, I'm like, I'm going to blow your mind because I do this completely differently than anything you've ever experienced. And they've all walked away going, wow, never, that, because I believe, and in my experiences, both personally and professionally, is horses will either give us what we need or show us what we need. And my job is to facilitate that. Generally, I'll have an idea for an activity and I present it and I just go with it. It's all I have to be in the moment as well, because and I've learned how not to be involved or be aware, because when I first started, I'd get involved and it would go someplace else and I'd be like, what? It's not supposed to be that way, until I finally realized, no, it is supposed to be that way. That's what they need. And as I tell them, like I said, I'm the navigator, they're the captain, and this is all about them. This has nothing to do with me. There is no right way or wrong way. I mean, a lot of people ask me, well, is this the right way to do this? I don't know. Is it? It's up to you. You get to make that decision. If they want to ask for help, sure, ask for help. The first question out of my mouth will be, what can I do to help you? Or how do you want me to help you? And so it's always empowering the client, because they have their own answers. This is about them, not about me. When I'm doing my own work, then it is about me. That's the uniqueness of it, and why I'm so passionate about what I do.
So if I heard you correctly, you would say that your equine program is not equivalent to another equine program. You bring some things to the table that are very different than what other programs might have.
Absolutely. My 35 years of working with clients and horses and understanding behaviors, I consider myself a lot of a behavioralist, because I have studied that. Like I said, I've worked with a lot of different horses that have had issues. I've helped them release these issues and work through them and whatnot. So I understand. I've worked with people with their horses, and I have a very unique skill set that most people just don't have. So I do bring it and just allow it to happen as it is. I don't have a lot of structure per se, if you will, where we're doing this, and this. It's very in the moment dynamic, because I can read body language. I can read a lot of things very quickly and assess very quickly. In fact, one of the first things I do is I have two dogs. I'll meet people at the gate and I'll introduce them. Their names are Dot and Lucy. And the first thing I tell everybody is, look, they're great, friendly dogs, but I ask you to help me with their training. And I say, I ask you, no talk, no touch, no eye contact. And I said, once they come in, they're going to try to engage you. Once you come in and they've settled down, they're friendly. If they're quiet, go ahead and pet them, love on them all you want, but just please don't engage with their jumping. And instantly, my dogs will tell me who's ignoring, what state of being everybody is by how they react. And so I already have that assessment right from the get-go. And then I can follow that with the horses and things like that. So I always joke, you get six coaches for the price of one. You get all my 35 years. You get 3,000-pound four-legged therapists, which are my horses, and then you get the bonus of the 265-pound four-legged coaches, which are my dogs. So most people can't offer that huge package like that.
That's incredible. Michelle, thanks for sharing about your program, sharing about the work that you've done for just so many years, and your love of these horses and the power that comes from working with them. I would imagine that people are going to want to connect with you. What's the best way for them to do that?
Email me or call or text. My number is 480-988-2165. Well, you can reach out at email at michelle.spiritmountain@gmail.com, and my website is spiritmountainhealing.com, and there's information on there as well. Plus all my social media. I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and Google My Business. So there's lots of different ways to reach out. Like I said, I do a complimentary overview and tour. Come get a taste of what I do, and if you're concerned or not sure it's going to work for you or just very curious, it's about a 45-minute session that I give complimentary. So
Very cool. Very cool. I love that. One other thing, I want to ask you one other thing, and I don't know if we'll keep this in the podcast or not, but I'm curious because I know from an insurance pay standpoint that equine therapy in and of itself doesn't typically get paid for unless it's being run by, master's level therapist, which you are, and you've got the notes to show that you've got this treatment plan and you're working on treatment goals. How does that work for you?
At this point, I don't take insurance.
Yeah, because it's so hard to get paid for it, right?
It's that, plus they also restrict a lot of times how many sessions I can do with clients. And I feel that is incredibly detrimental to the well-being of my client. I have a third party come in and who knows nothing about me or what I do and my clients to say, you only need 5 sessions. That's partly why I've started the nonprofit side in the process of that, to be able to get donations in that and be able to offer scholarships for those that can't afford it, or have no insurance, whatever. So right now I am private pay on that, because it is just, but I do keep notes and everything else and do all that. I run a lot of it under the coaching aspect as well, and that. So that's, at some point I may look at it. I don't know. I've got a lot of other plans to head. I'm working on collaborations with the Department of Corrections and a lot of other big things. And I'm actually working on being able to travel. I'm developing some workshops right now to travel locally. And then my goal is by next summer is to travel nationally with my animals and do consulting and workshops. So I may just skip the insurance thing altogether.
Yeah. And then with the consulting, people would pay you per your coming in per time, and you would just get that up front and they would take care of that. That's pretty cool. I like that idea.
A lot of my passion, not only with the horses, I do a lot of psychoeducation. I love teaching people. We are the only animals on the planet that have the ability to ask why. And on one hand, it's why we're on this meeting and doing all these cool things. But on the other hand, it's also why we get stuck because we can't find the answers. And that's one of my bigger goals is to bring it out, bring the education piece out through the horses, through consulting and these workshops. That's ultimately my dream and my passion, is where it really resonates. I want to be able to share this with as many people as I possibly can.
That's incredible, Michelle. I love your passion around this, and I'm definitely going to keep you in the back of my head as I talk to people and go, hey, you should probably go talk to Michelle.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Like I said, I've got a lot of things developing in the wings here. So
very cool. I appreciate it. Appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Awesome. I appreciate your time too.